One night my boyfriend and I were hanging out on the couch watching reruns of our favorite show when we heard a knock at the door. Most of our friends and family members usually called before they dropped by, so when we heard the knock at our door, we were a little startled. I stayed seated on the couch while he jumped to his feet. My boyfriend, who we will call Chad, was a protector and always did his best to make me feel safe. So, in a situation like this, it was no surprise that he would want to approach the door while I stayed back. I was honestly curious, so I tiptoed behind him. Before answering the door, Chad asked for the person on the other side of the door to identify themselves. I forgot to mention, at the time we heard the knock at the door, it was shortly after 11 o'clock, so a very odd time for a stranger to be knocking at your door. When the person finally spoke, she sounded scared, and her voice was shaky. She pleaded with us to open the door because she said she was pregnant and felt as if she was in labor. Chad swung the door open, and standing there was a pregnant woman. Her face was red, and she looked really scared. As an emergency room nurse, I sprang into action. I jumped in front of Chad and grabbed the woman and helped her onto her couch. Then seconds after that, two masked men knocked Chad over as he was closing the door. I turned to see them holding guns and demanding that we get on the floor. The pregnant woman's look of fear turned quickly into a look of deceit. I noticed very quickly on that her story was a ruse to enter our home. The woman removed the fake baby bump from her belly and sat it on the couch next to Chad, who was startled and couldn't stop staring at it. The three intruders began demanding money and jewelry, and when we told them that we didn't have any money, they started beating on Chad, who offered our car keys and jewelry, but they didn't want that. They wanted something more, something we didn't have. The intruders held us hostage for more than 2 hours, demanding money and telling us that if we didn't pay, they were going to harm us. Once they ransacked our home and realized that we didn't have the money, they decided to leave, but not before beating on Chad some more. They broke his nose and fractured his arm. That was his reward for being a good Samaritan, and my reward was seeing him in so much pain every day until he fully recovered. I just want to say, it's good to be a good person, but being safe in some cases is more important than being good.
So, one night my girlfriend and I got into a really nasty fight, and I decided to go for a walk to cool down. I put my earphones in and was walking through the city minding my business and thinking about how I was going to calm my girlfriend down when I got back to the apartment. While out on my walk, I called a few of my friends to vent before deciding to head back to the apartment. I decided to take a shortcut through an alleyway that is a known hiding spot for illegal activity, but I was desperate to get home quickly and decided it was worth the risk. I stepped into the dark alleyway, making sure to pay attention to my surroundings, and was ready for whatever danger lurked in the alley. On the few and rare occasions that I took this shortcut, I'd had encounters with prostitutes, addicts shooting up, in the usually harmless drug deal. People from the neighborhood knew me, including all these shady characters, so no one really bothered me. When I was midway through the alley, I saw a lady who was laying there lifelessly. She was dressed in professional attire and looked very out of place for the type of neighborhood we were in. It was obvious that she wasn't alive, and I confused about how she ended up this way. I unlocked my phone and called the cops before looking around to see if anyone was nearby. It was just me and the lifeless woman in the alley. I stepped away from her and walked to the end of the alley where I waited for the cops to show up. I didn't have much information to give to them, but they took my contact information to contact me if they had further questions. I don't really know what happened to the lady or how she had ended up in the alleyway, but if I had to guess, I would say that she came to buy drugs, and something went wrong. She definitely wasn't dressed like any of the other ladies from the neighborhood, and we were a far distance away from Wall Street, where she looked like she belonged.
The story I'm about to tell you happened about 3 years ago. I had been hanging with friends that Friday evening after a long work week. I began to drive home at some time before midnight when I realized that I was about to run out of gas. When I pulled into the gas station a few miles away from my friend's house, I noticed that there was a guy putting gas into his car. I pulled up a few gas pumps away from him but couldn't help but notice that he kept staring at me. I looked up at him and stared back, which was something my dad taught me to do. He said if you look someone right in the face, they will know that you aren't afraid of them and will more than likely leave you alone. Well, I was afraid but not wanting to show it. I stared back at the man. While pumping my gas, I noticed another car pulling up. It was a young woman about my age. She went into the gas station to pay, and immediately the creepy guy was no longer fixated on me. His focus was now on her as she walked by. She returned to begin pumping her gas. I got back into my car and quickly locked the doors before driving away. I looked in my rearview mirror and I could see the guy approaching the woman to speak to her. I thought to myself, at least I was safe and wasn't the one who had to deal with his advances. I made it home that night and felt safe. The next morning when I woke up and made my way to the kitchen, I saw my mom, who looked sad. I asked her what was wrong, and that's when she told me that the niece of one of her close friends had been murdered last night. I was so shocked as she gave me what little details she knew. I felt a knot in my stomach when my mom showed me a post on social media with a picture of the same woman that I had seen the night before. I told my mom what happened the night before at the gas station, and she told me that I had to go to the police station and tell them everything I knew. I told the police everything that happened the night, including a description of the man. It took almost a year for the full details of the woman's murder to come to light. It turns out that the creep at the gas station was on the hunt that night for his next victim. She hadn't been his only victim. For years he had harmed over 7 women in our area before he murdered her that night. He approached her asking her for directions to a nearby address, and when she gave it to him, he used that as an opportunity to ask her on a date, and she declined, which hurt his ego. He followed her back to her place that night and killed her right in the parking lot of her apartment complex. With witness statements and video surveillance, the detectives were able to piece the events of that night together to bring this creep to justice. Seeing him in the courtroom sent chills down my spine. I felt horrible for the victim, but also felt lucky. I felt as if she had given her life for me, because if she hadn't shown up that night, I could have easily been his next victim.
One night, I decided to take my dog Timmy for a walk. It had been many hours since his last bathroom break, and I had planned to sleep in the following day, which meant I wouldn't be up early to take him on a walk, so a long walk was in order. Our street was very quiet. It seemed like all the neighbors were already in for the night. Like I said, it was peaceful out that night. All we heard were the sounds of crickets in the distance, but when I turned the corner onto Maple Street, I couldn't believe my eyes, a dim glow emanating from the living room window of my neighbor's house. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what was happening, a home invasion. I was in total disbelief. This seemed like a really bad dream. My first instinct was to turn and run, to flee from the danger unfolding before me. But then I remembered Timmy, my faithful companion who relied on me for protection. Timmy was an older dog who had arthritis and other ailments. I crouched down, signaling for Timmy to stay low as we both slinked behind a parked car across the street. Through the window, I could see figures moving around. I couldn't see their faces though, because they wore masks. They were ransacking the place, tossing belongings aside as they searched for valuables. The realization hit me, my neighbors were being violated, and I wondered where they were while all of this was happening. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. I described the scene as quietly as I could. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, but every second felt like an eternity as I watched the thieves continue their rampage. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and the thieves came outside, carrying bags of stolen goods. My heart raced as they piled into a nearby car. I ducked down further behind the car, my heart pounding in my ears as I watched them drive away. As the car sped off into the distance, a sense of relief washed over me. But then a new fear settled in. What if they saw me? What if they came back for me? I waited, my heart still racing, until I was sure they were gone. Once I felt it was safe, I moved from my hiding spot. My legs were sore as I stood upright. I took a deep breath. I hurried back to my house with Timmy by my side. I was so amazed at how quiet he remained during the entire ordeal. Not one bark. I locked the door behind us. The police arrived shortly after, and I met them outside, providing them with a description of the thieves and the license plate number of the car. They assured me that they would do everything they could to track down the culprits and bring them to justice. The police were able to contact my neighbors who had been on vacation and planned to return the following day.
One time, I got caught up in some straight-up crazy mess. It all went down one summer night when the heat had the whole city feeling like a pressure cooker ready to blow. I was just walking home from my cousin's place, minding my own business, when out of nowhere, this car screeched up and stopped right in front of me. Before I could even react, these two dudes jumped out, all fired up like they were on a mission. They were throwing accusations at me, calling me by some other name, saying I owed them money. I am standing there, dumbfounded, trying to tell them they got the wrong guy. But they ain't trying to hear it. They're all up in my face, getting real aggressive. I'm trying to reason with them, tell them I ain't who they think I am. But they ain't buying, not one bit. They start getting physical, pushing me around like a rag doll. I'm backed against a wall, trapped in this alley with no way out. One of them pulls out a blade. I gotta tell you, I ain't never been so scared in my life, man. My heart pounding like a drum, and I can feel the cold sweat running down my back. I'm thinking this is it, this is how it ends. I ain't no fighter, never been in a scrap in my life. But desperation kicked in, and I swung my fists like a man possessed. I landed a lucky shot, catching one of them off guard. He stumbled back, clutching his jaw, and that's when I made my move. I bolted, man, ran like my life depended on it because it damn sure did. I could hear them shouting behind me. I took every twist and turn I could, ducking into alleys and cutting through empty lots. My breath was ragged, my legs burning, but I kept pushing, hoping I could outsmart them somehow. I didn't know where I was going, just focused on getting as far away as possible. Eventually, I lost them. I found a spot to hide out, catch my breath, and figure out what the hell had just happened. I was shaking like a leaf. I realized I had been caught up in some sort of case of mistaken identity, and those dudes were out for blood. I didn't know who they were or what they were mixed up in, but I knew I needed to lay low. I crashed at a friend's place for a while, keeping my head down and avoiding any spot those dudes might be looking for me. It was like something out of a movie, man, me hiding out like a damn fugitive. After a few days, the heat died down, and I finally felt safe enough to hit the streets again. I went to the police, told them what went down, hoping they could sort it all out. They took my statement, but man, I ain't never heard back from them. It was like they didn't care, like I was just another name on a piece of paper. I ain't gonna lie, that experience messed me up. It left me looking over my shoulder, paranoid as hell. I couldn't trust nobody, didn't know who might be watching or following me. Every car that slowed down, every shadow in the alley, it all set my nerves on edge.